Is it working? I think so. Okay. YouTube, social media, it's a learning curve, but we're back and thank you for being here. And today I want to talk about sensitive people, or people that are not here to explore altered states of consciousness, but want to utilize, or at least consider utilizing, psilocybin as a potential supplement for their mental health and support overall. So people that might fall into this category may include parents of small children, elderly, and really anybody that's just wanting to feel basically normal and get the benefits that this beautiful psilocybin molecule could potentially help with. Let me look at my notes. Okay, if you've done some research, you may or may not know that psilocybin helps to activate a global neurological network. So it activates a bunch of new neural pathways, potentially growing new neural pathways, activates the visual cortex of the brain. So there's a lot of activity in the nervous system. And when this happens, there's multiple effects that you might feel, or you might have the experience and contribute it to this factor. So when I've talked to and worked with parents with small children, one of the things that immediately happens that is very supportive in that situation is that the parent has less agitation, less frustration, more ability to be adaptive. And this is really supportive, especially when you have so many things going on and small kids. So small children require a lot of attention, and microdosing does help you become very present. I've heard from multiple clients of mine who are parents of small children is that they have more attention to give to their kids, and it's more present attention and focused. And it can feel like multitasking, where you're able to just give a lot of straight attention to your kid while then also going and managing the dishes and the laundry and all the other things. In the same instance, elderly folks, folks that are actually moving into maybe dementia, or may have had a stroke. I mean, I'm not a doctor, so, but you can see where this is going. There's this activity in the brain that's opened up, and it feels grounding in order to be very present, to feel very focused on what it is you need to focus on, and not just errantly actively going into a psychedelic space. Microdoses are not going to take you into a psychedelic space. So this is the safe zone, is when you take a microdose and it is sub-perceptual, meaning you don't feel anything. And then it has a compound effect that can happen, but you won't get into a psychedelic. You won't even really feel it. But what happens is that your body, your system is getting this medicine into the system, and you're cleaning out and clearing and opening up the nervous system, including the mind, including the heart and the presence. So I've definitely worked with folks that are 60 plus years old. And in those instances, there's a variety of different types of people, obviously. So it can go in many different directions, but there's a vitality that can come back. Just being able to create changes and be creative can be very supportive for the mental health. And this includes folks that are of any age, really, that are struggling with mental health issues and having to work and having to really manage all of the logistics of life. In many cases, you don't have the funding or the time to take a week off and go to a retreat, or take 3 weeks off and really explore altered states of consciousness. In this case, the psilocybin can be helpful while you're active in your life. So whenever I have a new client come in to work with psilocybin, we often talk about this is meant to help you be more present in your day-to-day life and help you work through the things that you want to work through, while also being present and working and going in your day-to-day activities. So you still go to work, you're still able to drive, you're still making yourself meals or eating out or whatever it is. It doesn't take away from your day-to-day. It actually gives you more time because you have more capacity to deal with more things. So when it comes to very sensitive people, we talk about starting off low and slow, meaning this isn't a push you off of the cliff and just start taking mushrooms. There's a process that could be supportive. So number one is really being introspective about your goals. What would you like this to help you with? Because microdosing, just like most things, it's not meant to be taken for a long time. It's not meant to be taken for the rest of your life. This isn't something that creates dependencies. It's non-addictive. So when we talk about microdosing, we're talking about a regimen for a period of time. So while you're working with this very special medicine, how you get prepared is very helpful. Figuring out what your goals are, meaning even if you just want to be more present with your kids, great, then that is something that can be supportive. And while you're working with the microdosing, because it's opening up new neural pathways, you have the ability to install new neural pathways that support your goals. Meaning, if you know you want to work with this medicine in order to support yourself with maybe depression or even with presence, actively, every time you take a microdose and every day you're in this regimen, you want to consider, am I being present? Is this helping? What can I do to become more present? So you might include meditation. You might include presence exercises, breath work, and things like that. If you couple the microdosing with practices that support your goal, ultimately you may be creating new neural pathways so that make your default more present. We have a default mode network. If you've researched psilocybin, you may have heard that psilocybin does help to dissolve the default mode and activate more neural pathways. So that being said, your default mode is maybe running on default. And let's just say in your default mode, it's very hard to be present. It's very hard to actively be at the task at hand because your mind is moving, or you're so used to trying to multitask that you just don't have the capacity to be really present. So when you are with the psilocybin and you know what your goal is, and you're like, okay, I'm going to work with this microdosing for X amount of weeks or months. And in that time, I know that I'm working on presence. So you want to employ these activities and these other tools that help you to become present, which while the psilocybin is dissolving the default mode and allowing you more creativity and activity, you have this opportunity to be able to install new habits, install new default mode. So when you are actively working on being present and you journal and maybe breathing exercises or meditation or just one-on-one conversations where you're doing active listening, this could essentially become your new default, so that when you stop taking the microdosing or you stop taking the mushrooms, you still feel very normal and you go back to this default space, but the default space has now shifted. So this is really the magic of microdosing, is the ability to kind of in a way reprogram yourself to be able to practice these new habits while having physiological support. So you can do this without psilocybin. There's no question. You can employ all of the tools that we just talked about, the breath work or the meditation and all of these. And I suggest you do explore that as well. When you have the psilocybin in your system, there's the neurological activity is actually scientifically proven is to be there, which means that it's physiologically supporting you. This isn't just a placebo effect. This is actual neurons, actual neural connections that are being regenerated and created. And I have personal experience in feeling this, where I start microdosing, I have a goal, I work on that goal and I work towards that. And then when I stop microdosing and it goes out of my system, I am shifted. I can feel and I have physical evidence that now that these new pathways are now part of my default. So it takes some practice, it takes a little bit of time, but this is the potential of microdosing, especially when you're sensitive and you really don't want to explore altered states of consciousness, but you do want to have the benefits of utilizing psilocybin in a way that is easier in the day-to-day life.